Yeah.
So it's, good and bad side. I know people have Zoom fatigue sometimes, but
Yeah.
still all good. Okay, well, I'm hoping it will pop up here because it says we're going live.
Yeah, it says live over here.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think we are. I'm looking for it on Facebook and hopefully it will pop up, but people are probably seeing us. Oh, and on YouTube. I totally forgot that we're doing it on YouTube too. So I'll close these down. And hello, everyone. So feeling really lucky today. These are SUP-centric discussions that I call them just because I love stand-up paddling. I love all aspects of it, but a lot of you know I'm kind of a SUP racing junkie. I've been racing since the beginning of 2010. I don't see myself burning out. Of course, I am an older adult, so I only have so much time, but watching what's going on, being involved what's going on has been very exciting. We've had a very strange year. We were just talking about Zoom though, and the good and the bad, but we're able to do something like this with Anya and Florian in different parts of the world. I believe it's late for you guys, right? A late night.
Yeah, I just had to adjust lighting. So,
but great to have you here. So both of you are you're leading SUP organizations in your country that I think just are a fantastic model. And as I said, I think to you, Anya, I do have kind of reasons why I really want to hear about this, because I think you're a model for other countries to set up in a way where stand-up paddling has a voice, but you're also working with your canoe and kayak and your surfing organizations, because each country, whether they chose to or not, from the international level, was kind of told stand-up paddling is part of what we do. So I really look forward to jumping in here. We actually have another American who is a race league director who I invited to come in too, because he and I have been talking a lot about forming a US organization. So yes, there are some biases here. Sorry about the little invitation type thing. An NGB is a national governing body. I hate to use acronyms, but I needed something short. I don't know if that's what you call it in your countries, Florian in Switzerland and Anya in South Africa. And I also don't have the visuals here, but I meant to put them, especially I think, Anya, I saw one of yours where you have the logos of your organization and the canoe and kayak and the surfing together. So not all about that, but about you guys being proactive, especially during this time, during COVID, and getting these things done. So would one of you like to start and just kind of tell us about your organization, the name and when it got started, and kind of what your mission is? And again, there's no right or wrong. I think you both have a little bit different tracks in what you're trying to do, and that's okay. There's a lot you can do with a national organization.
Brilliant.
These ladies first.
Okay, Anya.
So hi everybody, my name is Anya and I'm recently elected and selected as the president of Stand Up Paddling South Africa, and then also I manage the South African team. So when we go to international events, I help them get everything ready and in order for them to partake at these events. So Stand Up Paddling South Africa was we're about 11 years old, and from early up in kind of forming this board and association, and I'll talk about the word in our naming conventions when we get to the governing bodies part, but we kind of formed that relationship with Surfing South Africa quite early on, just because of the ISA championships and having to get those international colors, so that we can be represented underneath them. So we've been partnered with Surfing South Africa for quite some time, which has been absolutely fantastic. They help us get on the platform, on that international platform, to partake at ISA. And then a year ago, last year when COVID struck, it's kind of like we need to get our athletes on the water. And in South Africa, we were quite committed to water access. So we needed to find a way to get our athletes back on the water training. And Stand Up Paddling South Africa is not positioned as a federation in our country. So we've got a few governing federations, and Canoeing South Africa would be one of them. and then Surfing South Africa would be one of them. So Surfing South Africa could help us with our surfing athletes, but they didn't know a lot about racing. That would be flat water racing and ocean racing, and then sprints and technical as well. So they didn't really have the knowledge for that. And quite frankly, you're not really interested as a surfing body on the racing side of stuff. And that was when we were like, it's so obvious that Canoeing South Africa, which is a federation in our country with a lot of athletes on the water, whether it's social paddling or racing, so competitive paddling, they were represented by this body that's very proactive on not only a national level, but also international level. And they were very open for the conversation that actually Surfing South African started having with Canoeing South Africa to say, this is SUP also exists. And yes, we are covering the surfing side, but the other athletes should also have that place and position to be represented. And that's when the conversation started. And our former president, Mandy Scanlon, did an absolutely incredible job to start that conversation with both federations and made sure that we've got opportunities for our athletes, as well as just a greater reach for competitions. And that's when the conversation kind of started to partner with Canoeing South Africa as well. That's a mouthful, so I'm going to let Florian.
No, that's great. And I learned a lot too, because I didn't realize you had existed as a national organization for so long before that. And that it does kind of make sense that as ISA came along, then you were like working with surfing and then canoe and kayak now too. So all three. How about you, Florian?
Well, it sounds amazing and so familiar actually to me, right? So my name is Florian. Unofficially, I'm the vice president of the Swiss Stand-Up Paddle Association, recently created or recreated, because we had an association in Switzerland before who has worked for the past almost 10 years. And they laid down the activity just before or during the COVID hit, because the team was pursuing other dreams. And they have done an amazing job in the past, and we have picked it up from there. And we got in touch with both overlaying federations, right? ISA and canoeing, which both existed in our country already for the past 15 years almost. Even that if we are not a country with access to the sea, right, which is a special condition. We are one of those countries, rare countries in the world, that we don't have an actual sea. So a surfing kind of legacy isn't really there, right? But still, then we have a lot of surfing in Switzerland. And I think we were lucky. We were really lucky that on both sides of the overlaying federations, we have found open ears and great-minded people that welcomed us from day one, I have to say, and pursued with us the dream that we kind of find our own association and working together. And I think that was at the beginning a very difficult goal. As you said, it made it very complicated after both international organizations crashed into each other. And it happened here in Switzerland, right? So the court was here in Switzerland. The entire process, we followed it very, very closely. And and it didn't make it any easier, right, to get people together. But then I still have to say we were incredibly blessed with talented people here on both federations that were open-minded enough to sit down and put aside differences and look proactively for the good of the athletes, which I think is the most important part and always gets forgotten. No? That the main reason why these organizations crashed is, besides a completely different view of both sports, also there's a business side behind it, right? And there's interest that people want to keep. And I understand that, but at the end of the day, we have to look for the good of the athletes and the sport itself. And I think that should be always our highest goal. And we were lucky enough to push that message through and to sit on the table and say, let's create this underlying association that works with both federations proactively, that gets in charge of that stand-up paddling, racing, and trying to form juniors and groups and make a team for the actual World Championships, right? I was lucky enough to go to the World Championships in China in 2018. I actually met the South African team. The boss was, I think it was
Karen?
Dave Maxwell. I think I met Dave Maxwell back in the day. Yeah. And it was super, super nice, but we were going actually really unorganized, right? So we didn't have the support by then of the ICF, and we had to send different teams to ICF and then to ISA. It is difficult enough in our sport for athletes to travel around and to make these competitions and to actually get the support they need to actually develop the sport, so that we disagree over tiny little things like what's the regulation on your side, what's the regulation on the other side. The athletes want to race, and I think that is, and they want the competition, and they want to have a chance to maybe go to Olympia if it is possible over the next years, right? And that is the main goal. The rest is politics, and we have tried in the best of our abilities to shrink that down to the really thing that is important, and that is giving support to the athletes.
Fantastic. And I love hearing all that. And you touched on something, I think Anya mentioned it. It's very different in different countries. Actually, I think we're the odd man out in the US that we are not there's no governmental sport department or recreation. So sport outside of our big ones, which are basketball and football and all that make money, has to be very independent in a way. But if you are a federation, I think you called it, Anya, tied to the Olympic pursuit, there is, some money there. So some people who are a little more jaded, I think, or, cynical, they point to, well, it's all about money. And you've mentioned politics, but it isn't. It doesn't have to be. I think you both have said examples of, you need people with open ears and minds and to talk about it and not get stuck on. We have a lot of little things. I think within SUP, without kayak and canoe and surfing, we don't all use the same board classes and age groups and rules. That, we have a long way to go. We're a very young sport. So I think it's fantastic what you have done and how you're working together. So
I think we identified, right, that there's more that unite us other than that divide us. I mean, yeah, we do things differently, different gear, different bottle, but at the end of the day, we are water sport athletes, right? And once you look at it from the athlete's perspective, we really have more that unite us, actually.
Yeah. So I think maybe like you guys, we're looking at forming an organization that is set up to maybe be a federation if it's ever needed, but done the right way within country rules and boundaries in Olympics. But beyond just the those top athletes who we do need, either, and again, there's the two we don't know about, one competition. We hope they're both happening this year. The ICF has announced and moved theirs from June now to September in Hungary. ISA, to my knowledge, has not announced that there will be one, but hopefully those SUP surfers and technical wave racers will get to do their thing too. But in sending those teams, I think it's so great that you guys are working with and helping them, or again, in some countries, they might already have an established system. So it's, I think there's lots to work on there. But I want to talk a little bit about that pyramid below our top athletes and building. I heard you say youths or juniors. I know in the US, we have not gotten ourselves all connected. There was an early organization that was doing it well, that kind of went in a different direction. It was called the WPA, even though it was mostly US. But is that part of your goals too? I know there's only so much you can take on. There's a lot you can do as a national body. Are you trying to organize the sport, build the sport, grow it? Are those some of your goals, or is it just focused, which is fine, on the top athletes, the elite?
So
I let you go first, Anya.
That's a lot, huh?
So one thing that I've been focused on, and I think the previous kind of board members as well, is that representation is so important, and representing different age groups, different disciplines, to make up that entire structure so that we can actually move forward and into these different competitions. The other thing that I also very much believe it works is that how social paddlers and junior paddlers kind of feed into that athletes. For me, it works like that chicken and egg analogy. If you see the athletes on the water, you'll inspire people to start paddling, whether it's juniors starting to paddle or whether it's social people starting to paddle. And the more of that energy is on the water. So the more paddlers you have actually partaking in, if it's social with your family, if it's little small races that's not as big and like flamed up like the big competitions, but you just get that fun back on the water, and that kind of encourages again that racing element. And then again, if you work on juniors and social paddlers to get into that racing energy as well, then you also spice up the competition of the potential of more competitors on the water. So I really believe it's that entire, like, you need both sides, and definitely with SUP that's not as big and like, and you also spice up the competition of the potential.
Sorry about that. That's delayed voice. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I was like,
you on the
like
Two Anyas.
Yeah, two Anyas.
I don't think the world is ready for that. No, but so SUPSA, we do encourage a lot of social activities, as well as smaller races to get new paddlers on the water. And I think the difficult thing at the moment is with COVID, there's a lot of family activities that's actually been happening. If you have the mother and the dad on the water, then the children will maybe also be on the water, and if the children want to be there, the parents want to be there as well. And there's a lot of activities that's rather kind of gone to cycling and running and more family friendly activities, where supping can easily be a family friendly activity, but a lot of people have kind of gone to other sport types as well. So we're trying to just like get that social activity going again, so that we encourage that water fun again. But all in good time.
Yeah. So we hear a lot of that, fun and activity and getting everyone involved. And again, this new wave of people from COVID who've gotten outside and want to enjoy the water will move into, some of them will move into racing. And how do we encourage that and keep that growing? So it sounds like you guys in South Africa definitely are involved with the other levels too. Florian, I'll let you answer that too. Are you guys involved? Or are you just, I know you're newer, so you're mainly focused on the teams?
No, actually, I couldn't agree more with Anya, right? The key is community building. And yes, the association we have created is new, but for example, I started stand-up paddling back in the early 80s. So I'm one of I think, to the generation that actually started first on those types of sports. And we have come a long way with other clubs that we have created in Switzerland already for the past 5 years. I have created a stand-up paddle school in Switzerland, in the capital, for the past 10 years almost. And it is building upwards towards a competition style team, right? But mainly we are focusing right now on developing youth. And because what we have seen is that the main growth category that we have both in international races and in local races is masters. Actually, is people 40 up. is our athletes in the sport actually grow older, and we have, especially in Switzerland, we haven't had that youth push, like, especially because we don't have access to the sea. Water sports is not something that comes naturally to the Swiss people. So there needs to be a lot of work done still to actually convince the youth and the grooms that this is a sport that is new, that is fun, that it can be developed, that we can travel with, that there is a higher goal which you can achieve if you want to. And we're trying to help you to build it up. But it is what Anya said, you need that community around it. You need those amateur paddlers, those families around it, because that is what creates this vibe on the water. And it's also the people who support those athletes. You need the parents to support the youth. You need the friends and the colleagues to support the other amateur people. Stand-up paddling itself, if you do it by your own, is a very lonely sport. and we need to be together on the water. It's always more fun together on the water. And I think that's the message we try to bring along. And with the school, for example, we do quite a work every year we have almost 3,500 rental people that actually go on the water. And we make over 150 courses where we introduce people into the sport. We have over 500 children from different schools that we actually give the possibility to taste water sports. And the association and the clubs that we work together with are trying to focus that around the youth and try to build it up, right? Because we see it now. We have upcoming World Championships, as you mentioned, in Hungary now in ICF, and we struggle with the juniors. We really have to look and develop and try to build a team that has a long-lasting future.
Oh, great to hear that both countries are working on that. And it is so much about community. Such a good point that we were able to do it here because it is naturally socially distant during the pandemic. But as much as we're on our own craft, people want community and people do want to be a part of it. I encourage people to try coming to a race who are just looking for community, not focus on the race part, but just to come and meet other people who are like-minded, who are, addicted to being near the water. Now there's that whole research about that is actually a thing, which is the blue mind is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So within your countries, you're developing youth, you have club systems, something I wish we had a little stronger here. Do you have a whole racing structure? Is there a point system, for instance, within your countries or anything? I know you're having these national championships to field the teams to ICF and ISA, but do you have just breakdown, are there connected races, let's say, all around the country? Through you.
So in South Africa, if we look at our areas where there's a lot of athletes and or more races, we're looking at KwaZulu-Natal, which is our east coast, and then also Cape Town, which is down at the bottom, and between those two cities, with Johannesburg, where I live, which is not at the ocean. I'm very sad about that, but I'll get my way there. But so in Cape Town, Durban, we've set up a few races that kind of happens on an annual basis. Despite the pandemic, or with the pandemic, without the pandemic, we try and get those races on the calendar. And at selected races, our athletes can gather points. Which is then in competition with the other athletes, depending on how many races enter and the likes. And then we rank the athletes at the end of the year to make the next year's squad. Once you make the squad, you are in the training squad to then train up and be selected for the team for international events. And I think now, speaking with COVID happening and with this partnership with Canoeing South Africa being a very strong federation and still with following the COVID protocols very strictly and doing a fantastic job. They've actually kept a lot of their races on the calendar and opened up space for stand-up paddlers also to compete and have a discipline for stand-up paddling as well, where we've selected a few of those races as well, where they can gather those points, which has been a tremendous help. As you've mentioned, both of you have mentioned, stand-up paddling is still a smaller sport, and a lot of our races are set up by either SUPSA or then event organizers across the country who's had a very, very difficult time in COVID, being a water sport, being limited to activity, and then obviously having a massive impact on their income for shops and stuff. So that's been difficult for event organizers to kind of keep up with organizing events. So whatever event we can actually get on the water these days with the canoeing events, which is just creating that greater pool, athletes can then gather points across those events. Yeah.
How about Florian in Switzerland? Is there a united point system or linking of events?
Yes, there was a united point system just until pre-COVID. We had over the past 6 years a Swiss tour, which was different stops on different lakes around the country. That was created by a wonderful couple that also have a stand-up paddle school, and they put so much effort in it, and we are eternally grateful for the work they've done to actually create this. tour, which had over 7, 8 races every year. One of them actually going also international now with the SUP tour. And those stops all counted with different points, and basically ended up with an all-over leadership list at the end of the year. This has changed a little bit. The tour now with COVID is difficult to actually, you said it, Anya, the COVID situation has changed so much. Organizers are really struggling. We have the same problem here. Regulations are hard on group gathering together, and we're trying to figure it out. We expect to have at least 5 races by the middle end of the year. Yes, that everything will count, and it's very similar to Anya's system, which it will count on overall, but also we will have tryouts, and there are different options for athletes to actually become part of the international team, and they can work themselves towards it. Right now we have an ABC system where we have fastest athletes go directly into the A group. We have a B and a C group, which are developed, and which is people that actually want to work towards the A group, towards the international championships, and to the international team, to the Swiss team. I think we experienced something a little bit strange compared to other countries during COVID situation. Actually, stores were closed. This is right. We have the same that like Anya mentioned, but the sport itself almost tripled. Sales went through the roof compared especially to our bigger neighbors. I have to remind, we are a very small nation. We're barely 8 million people. Our next neighbor, Germany, for example, on the other side, it's 88 million. But our SUP market it's actually larger, and our SUP market tripled in the past year with the COVID, because stand-up paddling is one of the nicest social distancing sports that we actually have, and many people actually search the lakes and the open waters to social distance, and we were, and I know it from almost every distributor in the country, almost completely sold out by beginning summer last year. It was almost impossible to find a stand-up paddle in the country. And that is surprising, and I think super positive. And now we have to see where all this sold gear goes, and how can we actually gather it together and make it useful for the people, that there is actually an infrastructure, and there are events, and there are social events where they can go and they can attend to. Now we have all those single paddlers going around the country, or everyone on its own, and now we have to find a way to group them, to gather their interest, to actually spark a little bit their interest in the sport, and tell them that there is more than just paddling alone, right?
Yes. And actually, you might be surprised. I think a lot of countries had that same experience. The US sold out of stand-up paddle boards, but also other outdoor equipment, everything, camping, bicycles, those.
Yes,
they're having a lot of issues still with shipping. We're going to have a lot of post-pandemic demand, I think, still, because raw material, there's all kinds of infrastructure issues and things that are leading to this still being an issue, that there aren't enough out there. Yeah. But what an exciting problem to have. And as you said, how do we convert some of those recreational paddlers who get really hooked, onto what the next thing is going to be, which we hope might be racing, right?
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? That's the challenge now, to address those people, to actually to find them, to gather them together, and to give them a little bit of a taste where the sport actually can go and can lead them.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, it'd be wonderful, besides connecting within your country and all that you're doing and connecting with the other organizations, if we can connect the countries too, and have kind of a group of SUP NGBs of other national organizations. So I know in some countries I haven't been able to figure out, or there might be maybe 3 different groups that are all doing sort of something similar and haven't quite come together. So it's, as we said, it's not that it's intentional or negative, but a lot to be done still in organizing things. So some questions have come up here on Facebook. Oh, let's see. Somebody was asking about China, but then they looked it up and found out that was an ICF event. Yes, it was.
Yeah, well, 2 events in China, right? We had the ISA event in 2019 and the ICF.
That's right. And ISA has been having world championships for quite a while. I forget the first year. It started 2012, maybe. ICF, again, that's when I first saw sort of this, unfortunately, clashing behavior was in Portugal, where the ICF attempted to have their first world championship 3 years ago. But interestingly, in fact, sorry, Portugal, maybe you're working together more now, but it was the Portuguese Surf Association shut down the Portuguese Canoe and Kayak Association last minute. And I thought that was very unfortunate, because back to what you said, Florian, the athletes were planning to go. Many of them had tickets. There was prize money, and these guys, some of them are trying to make a living doing this. So I think any opportunity for growth of our sport, and thank you to ISA and ICF, both wanting to grow stand-up paddleboarding, but sometimes, yeah, we don't want to have any more of that where they clash and it doesn't work together. So again, your model, I think, is really working. Another question, what are the obstacles to youth participation as you see them? I know, Florian, you mentioned you're able to get schools out on the water. I would say an issue in the US is that it's not, the paddle sports are not part of our high school or gymnasium or whatever you call your later level teenage education. So it's not in the school. It's not one of the sports that they can practice on campus. So if there was to be anything, it's over here. How about you guys getting youth into stand-up paddling? What are some obstacles? Any thoughts?
I think an obstacle, but it can also be very much a climbing step for us to kind of go into, is that some of our other sports really encourage really the basics of what is needed to do a water sport. Like our life-saving organization, federation, union, I think they're a federation as well. They've got a lot of very young people getting into what is water and what safety around water is, and just really introducing their youth and our country's youth to that elements of water and the ocean, and then getting them on crafts to get them on the water. And we've actually had very cool and interesting conversations with them as well, as a additional partnership, to see Life Saving South Africa being so close to our prone discipline as well, and to see how that can actually link up as well. So yes, an obstacle that we aren't getting athletes as young as we can. I know that with ICF we can only start participating at 15 years old, so that's something that some people question as well, but really to work into our model that we've got to teach our youth what water sport is, and to combine that with joining us. It's not just stand-up paddling and only this one, might be for some people expensive sport, but you can do life saving as well, you can do your canoeing as well and surfing as well, and really make use of that partnership. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I love the life-saving concept and what you do in South Africa, Australia. I know it's very big. We don't have that as strong, and I would assume Switzerland, not being on the coast, you probably don't have that whole lifeguard, ocean lifeguard. But what a great thing to grow up in. And we have had numerous of our early top athletes really were those water people who started in that type of activity, who've had this kind of early life of all types of water.
I mean, we absolutely don't, right? I mean, we are a mountain country. We are happy that we have the lakes, and beautiful lakes. I think more beautiful lakes. But our main problem actually is infrastructure. And as nations like Anya's in South Africa, they have beaches and they have an existing infrastructure for, as you say, prone paddling and maybe outriggers and surfing. And there is infrastructure, and it starts with the tiniest, most normal things like a changing cabin, a bathroom, a locker where you can leave your things, board and gear storage facilities, and all that infrastructure. We don't have it, and it's very difficult to actually build, because every square centimeter of the lake borders in Switzerland are already built, already in possession of either a government or a private entity. Actually, water access for us is incredibly difficult. And what we have focused, at least with myself, with the school for the past 10 years, is to actually create infrastructure. And I have seen the sport grow around the infrastructure. And we talked to the local authorities that this is a sport with a very low entry level. It is popular between the younger people. Let me try to actually go into the already existing sport areas, land areas, build stations closer to the water, give access to people to gear and to different gear, right? And to have the old range of gear that actually you need for initiating adults to a certain extent, teenagers, smaller children. It needs life jackets. It needs different types of boards. It needs different types of paddles. All that needs space. It needs gear room. So we struggled mainly with that infrastructure and are still struggling. I know our clubs, our local clubs here in Switzerland, they struggle a lot. They always have to go by the hand of someone, which is usually a canoe club or part of a canoe federation thing, or maybe another water sport entity like windsurfing, for example, and there maybe exists a little bit of an infrastructure, or maybe rudder boats, which also is something in Switzerland that has a longer tradition and a longer history. But mainly infrastructure was our big, or is still our big problem, right? The younger people that we actually can bring to the water and they experience it and they like it, they actually come and they repeat. And now that we have a little bit of an infrastructure, we actually see that the younger youth comes and says, hey, this is fun, and this is not something that everyone else does. And actually, I'm only 5 years, so maybe I'm the fastest, and that is actually fun. And you see that growing slowly. It takes a lot of effort. And I think we are at the beginning of building infrastructure right now to actually, give the sport a chance over the next 10 years.
I think those are excellent points, infrastructure and access to water. And I would say the US very similarly, maybe most places. I mean, I'm in Southern California, a very popular tourist destination, and the ocean is very popular, almost impossible to get summer access, but we don't have a club system with, as you said, that physical space. I always think of Australia, where everyone belongs to a beach club, where you have that storage and you have a place to put all the toys, whatever they are, whatever your watercraft of choice is, and you have the life-saving system that you have, or it's not a system, but the
history of life saving, right? I mean, I've been in Australia and Northern Beaches last year, 2 years ago, and I see the entire tradition. I mean, I have seen entire schools surfing, and that's part of their daily sports courses, lessons that they have. And for us, that is completely unthinkable, right? I mean, that the culture they have, it's absolutely beautiful, brings people to the water and to water sports. And we have to somehow bridge that and try to, by creating infrastructure and try to spark interest for the sport. Right?
Yeah. And along those lines, I have to mention safety and swimming. I mean, and access to learning how to swim is an issue too. I mean, Anya, you brought it up early, that access it is this huge issue on a number of different levels, and how we get people into the sport. And I know the early adopters often were, you talked about the masters group, part of that was where we were in life and that we might have been able to afford the early ones that maybe didn't have a less expensive model. So that was definitely a hurdle that was limiting people that we need to look at, and how do we get people to the water? But the physical infrastructure, that would be so fantastic if we had a better system there. But again, talk about partnerships. If it's the life-saving, or in your country, maybe it's the kayak and canoe that do have a boathouse on the lake, or in our case, rivers, ocean, all the different types of water. How do we work with them and make that a stand-up paddle friendly place too? Along those lines, there's another question, and it says, are you SUP focused only? Or do you do all paddle sports? They're asking about your organizations. And a lot of that comes from, this is someone in the US who's a league director. Most of our events, I have to say, we get invited, we are so grateful to the other water sports, because many of our early events were not SUP specific. They were existing events out of outrigger. We have a huge outrigger, Southern California. Out of prone paddling would invite us. So these different events, stand up, we were the new guy that often got invited to those that were open. So we have huge gratitude for all those groups, but it is interesting in trying to do what we've talked about, like pull out teams and have point systems that are SUP specific without offending and, or trying to embrace everything. But what about that for you guys? How do you, are a lot of your events multi-craft?
So, for example, in South Africa, in SUPSA, it was always stand-up paddling South Africa, but it was 2 years ago in 2019, we decided to have a DRATHER stand for Stand Up and Paddleboard South Africa, so that we really make sure that our prone athletes are also represented. Although proning has very great similarities with life saving and one of the crafts they paddle there are some small changes for your longer distance for your prone guys, and also the craft that they paddle with is a little bit different. So we wanted to make sure that we bring them along because they are also included in the ISA, right?
Right.
So, so all our events cover stand-up paddling and paddleboarding, prone specific, and now being invited from Canoeing South Africa side, it's obviously with the canoeing guys and surf ski guys as well, but we kind of manage our own athletes, and also the rankings and stuff we take from the results from those events. So you can say it's multi-craft, but at the end of the day, we make sure that we look after the rankings and results of our own athletes, being prone and stand-up paddling.
Okay, great. Got that. How about you guys, Florian?
I think Anya is a little bit further down the road than us. We are still in the process of actually reaching out. I think that's the honest and fair way to say that. We had certain events that are multi-craft, especially with kayaks and OCs, especially longer distance races. Like we have an ice race, which is famous in Europe for 18 kilometers, beautiful lake. And there we usually are multi-craft. We don't have a large prone section, for example, in Switzerland. There's not many people who do that. And we haven't yet been able to actually reach the community and to invite them to actually share events. It's definitely on the very top of our goal list for the next 2 years. And we're trying to actually now also with dragon boats, for example, to put that together. We will probably have the first, let's say again, a Swiss national championship where we try to do multi-craft. It is a difficult process because every gear have different requirements. For example, we have the dragon boats. They are very large boats with multiple participants. It needs an entirely different setup where they can board into the craft. The routes are different. We are not having a technical kind of race. We have a straightforward race, for example, right? So it changes a little bit. It makes the events a little bit more complicated. At the end of the day, we probably will do it like Anya said. We care a little bit about our rankings and see that the SUP sport has its part in it, but we obviously welcome everyone, open warm it. Like the goal should be that we do a multi-craft sport, and we also had it recently with foilers that's starting, pump foilers, for example, that this is growing and exploding in Switzerland. I honestly don't know why, but we, for example, have that, right? So there was a proposal that maybe why not do a foil pump race during a Swiss Championship SUP race, right? So making a very small little kind of racetrack and try to pump foil in this.
Yeah,
you are very welcome. It is starting, but we are still in the process of reaching out.
Well, I think it's a challenge because you want to honor and organize and not get too complicated, but there's reasons, especially with traditional or prone paddleboarding, which I have some friends who are very upset because paddleboarding has now become the generic term and people mean stand up. And they said, we're the paddleboarders. The name was already taken, but it seems to be kind of an overlying, anyway, that's a whole nother topic, is the language and how we write it and everything. With or without the hyphen between stand up. I noticed we all do that differently. But I did want to throw in, you brought up life saving, another group that could be as involved, but chose not to, which is just fine, as surfing and canoe and kayak, is wind. Because having worked a lot on the industry side of this, our big stand-up paddleboard companies at the beginning were the windsurf companies. They were already, the big ones had international distribution. They made a board the size that we needed. A lot of people who really did it early used a windsurfing board and took out the dagger, with a makeshift paddle or sometimes a tandem surfboard, but windsurfing. And then now there's the wing. You talk about foiling. There's now this new addition that can be on a stand-up paddleboard or a foil board. And So there's a lot of offshoots that overlap so much, which again, that's a beautiful thing, but it's also makes things complicated, doesn't it? And our I was going to say our traditional or prone paddle boarders, we have that lifeguard group, and then we have these long distance hardcore people who really have a whole different mindset and approach, and they don't necessarily want to be part of our system. So that's interesting too. It's good to be open, but sometimes they have their own ideas or don't need the organization. But I think ICF especially deals with that a lot, having tried to embrace anything. I guess their definition is if you have a paddle in your hand and you are facing forward. So rowing is the only exception, because it's backwards crew that is not included under ICF's idea of what they do. There are a few other questions here. One had to do with a hippo. I think that was just, Harrison says, I did a water tour and had
that must be for Anya, not for
away.
me.
Yes, that would be for Anya. How much do animal inhabitants play a safety factor? Is that a big issue in South Africa? I know there's what's the name of that river? You have an amazing whitewater race that people have done stand up, the Doozy or something?
Yeah. The Doozy River, yeah. And there's been some stand-up paddlers who's done that. For the last couple of years, we haven't seen SUPs on that race. For animal inhabitants, we haven't had massive problems on the Doozy. I know there are some social groups that go on rivers as a social excursion, and they see the beautiful African wildlife. I think in South Africa we do value the wildlife as a treasure of our country. So seeing wildlife while being on a SUP makes it so like emerging, and that's exactly why I fell in love with stand-up paddling. Is it gets you on the water and you get a different view of the water. I know that if you are faced with a croc or a hippo or a shark, it's not the best thing. You don't really immerse yourself in that experience. And I know some of our paddlers in the ocean have seen sharks this side, so it's not, and I'm sure some get thrilled by the idea of it and others just not. So
some of us somewhere in between, because we have great whites here, but they're juniors. That's at least what we tell ourselves. They're too small, but they're still scary as heck when you see them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that is interesting. Yeah.
Besides very aggressive swans, we actually don't have very much at all.
That's awesome.
I mean, we have bird
swans
life.
are aggressive though.
Yeah, very, very, and it's a large bird. No, we have mainly bird life, and we're working together already now with lots of bird protection communities to actually try to avoid the clash between now early adopter stand-up paddlers that explore nature, but maybe interfere with protection wildlife areas, right? So we have that. A great part of the region in Switzerland is UNESCO World Cultural Heritage. So there's a lot of nature protection going on, and in Switzerland in general, right? So bird protection is something that is very, very in the mind of people. And we try now in the best of our abilities to work together with those groups and proactively try to engage our paddlers in not only in a respectful behavior, but also in collaboration, and see if maybe we see the world from the water side while the bird protection guys usually look from the land side. So there is an interaction that it can be beneficial for both of them, and we're trying to connect those dots right now. Yeah. And it's not easy, but I think I mean, other than that, we don't have very large, few ducks, but other than that, I mean, it's a different feeling, right? I have been in Australia, for example, and I have been hiding from the first dolphin I have seen from on my board and cowering because in the first 5 seconds, I couldn't distinguish, right? We are not professional shark spotters here in Switzerland. So you look at the fish and you say, oh, that's quite large. Let's give it a moment and take the feet out of the water and have a certain respect for that. Yes. But it's like she says, it's absolutely amazing to actually go out into nature and experience that. And when I travel, and I usually stand up paddle in other parts of the world, that is the part I think I most enjoy. And I think it should help to attract people also to the water, because one of the benefits of our sports with the stand-up paddle is also you don't have to constantly be in movement. You can sit on the thing, you can plan larger tours. It gives you the ability to take gear with you. You have, especially with the with the touring paddlers, which plan larger tours and exploration trips really more than anything else, like we had it with kayak back in the days, right? So I think this type of adventurous exploration that you can do with a kayak, or we have done the past 20 years or 30 years with kayaks, now kind of moves a little bit to the stand-up paddle side and introduces also families and other people that once so water affine to kayaking, and not because it was a very gear intensive sport, right? So you see that exploration mind open and to go out and see a little bit the nature.
I think we all agree on that, and I will never tire of seeing dolphins. But you're right, the first sight of a fin does give you a little bit of a heart flutter, right?
Yeah, especially if the water isn't that clear. I had that in Perth, right, when the water wasn't clear on the outside of a harbor and you see a very big shadow. The first reaction might be just take the feet out of the water just for a second.
But I have to, Carolyn Gill, we have paddled with otters, dolphins, seals, and even a distant whale in Cape Town. Come visit us.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and same here. Whales and dolphins are what we're seeing a lot of now. Seals all the time, which for some people are strange. For instance, the other side, Florida. Manatees, do you know what those are? If you go to Florida.
Absolutely, beautiful.
They're amazing creature. So yes, the water creatures are a big thing. I was going to try to paste, see if anybody wants to join us, but it looks like they're mainly asking questions here. Get that to move. Yeah. But structure-wise, infrastructure, structure of your organizations, congratulations, and really amazing that you have what you've done in linking and having, again, open to putting things together. And I hope that this might be useful to other countries who are thinking of doing it or already doing it or trying to, like what happened in Switzerland, reorganize a bit post-COVID. It's almost.
I think it's also in the interest of both overlaying federations, right? We see it here, for example, the canoeing federation. They have a lot of paddlers that may be attracted by the stand-up paddling, but it's not their main sport and it's not their main focus. So there was also a big part of the community that was grateful that someone stepped in and actually takes over a little bit and gets in charge of attracting those paddlers. And I think we had the same with the surfing community. Not all surfers are paddlers and the other way around. And I have plenty of paddlers that they're not interested in shortboards. I myself, I never have been. I grew up on a Spanish island. I have never been a shortboard surfer. I always have enjoyed if I have a longboard, and then it was a little bit for me. It was more fun, right? So I never identified as a surfer, to be honest. Even if now I enjoy taking my 14-footer in the biggest waves I can, but I never have been the surfing kind of guy. I never identified with that, and most of the paddling community doesn't. So how can we put ISA right mentality closer to that? And I think it needs a little bit of an isolated organism that collaborates, but doesn't have to be straight ISA or ICF. You can collaborate in the best spirit and with the best intentions. It doesn't need to be either or. And I think that's an important message that people need to understand. You don't have to choose. You should always find a middle ground.
And that's the message I got by learning about both of your organizations and from you, is that you can collaborate and we can't. So thank you for being role models in that. Is there anything else you want to add before we sign off? But we will stay in touch. My vision would be, and again, not to step on anyone's toes, but that there would be an SUP, an International Federation of SUP at some point in time, because I do, like you said, there's the overlap, but sometimes you need a voice. And if nothing else, it would be a way just to link all of our organizations, because I think we could help each other out a lot at the
absolutely. And I jump in and I say, Anja, we would love to actually go down to South Africa. I know many of the team right now is actually looking for training sites overseas, and we're trying to look for waves, obviously, which we don't have a lot here, and for warmer weather, we have to say honestly. So we are right now exploring a little bit what are our options to train off season in wintertime, right? And South Africa was definitely on the list. So I would be happy to engage in a talk about it.
Love that.
Please put us on the top of the list. It's a beautiful country with a lot of water and friendly people, the best people. So yeah.
There is one really
But Kristen,
specific question that is asked here about point systems, and I don't know if that's an easy one to answer or not. Are you guys familiar with what you use, and is it complicated? Have you found it? How labor intensive is it? And again, that's something at some point we do have. At one point, we had a national ranking system from SUP Bracer. It's called the Paddle League for a year or two. And then there is, I'm not sure who's doing it, but somebody in Europe has a SUP world ranking right now, trying to pull out with weighted and all of that. But do you have within the country maybe a simpler system, or are you familiar with yours?
So I can definitely share more about ours. I don't really do the calculations to get it all. I know it's not that intensive and it's not that labor intensive as well, or complicated. It does take into account the amount of races you race against in a specific race, which is quite important. And then your positioning in that race, where you end up your result. But I am 100% open to share our policy with you, Kristen, and you can share it to whoever, so that we can all learn from each other's ways and see how we can take it forward. And I think that's the beautiful thing of what you mentioned, if it's a international federation thing or if it's just a platform to keep on talking. I know that with all the international events happening, it's always great to have that platform with other people who's in the same boat with the same questions, regarding either it's athletes or the competition coming up or rules that's just unclear or very clear, you know, just to have that space to keep on engaging and make sure that we grow the sport worldwide. So yeah, thank you for you and engaging with us as well. It's absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Well, I'm also not responsible in my organization for the pointing. I can give a little bit of an overview. It's basically fairly simple, right? We give a top amount of points for every participant in a race, and we add at the end of the day. I know that for the international team, we have a 7% rule, which everyone should be in a range of 7% to each other to actually qualify for the national team, right? So that's a little bit an overview. I'm also very happy to delegate that question and to get back to you with more information and to share. And we have someone in the team that actually takes care of that. And very, very happy to share if there are any questions.
It'd be great to form a sharing organization, like you said, under whatever we want to call it, because good thinking has gone on in different places and there's no reason for us all to be doing it from scratch. Plus, we will be able to work together better in the future if we're moving towards a system like to say, oh, well, we're doing it this way this year, but I really like what you're doing in your country. We might like adopt that next year kind of thing. So
absolutely. We also learn with every international event, right? Like one of the main goals of our newly created association is to engage with international partners to actually attract international events to the country. And we had that, for example, I sit down early or last year and early summer with Tristan Baxford from the APP. And Tristan and I had a wonderful talk here in Switzerland, and he came over and we checked out locations and looked a little bit what is possible to attract international events actually to the country. And I think if that happens more and more, we learn also a lot more about how the bigger events are happening. What is their management? How is the organization? How is the point systems behind them? So we're still in that learning phase where we try to actually really engage with bigger events and see how we can adjust it for our tiny nation, right?
Yeah. All righty. Well, thank you both so much. I don't think we have any, well, there was a lot of fun commentary. We had some people watching. Thank you for watching. If you know somebody who would be interested in seeing this, it will be on Facebook somewhere. KT Outside, I believe, is my page, but also it will be on YouTube. KT Outside, I will right away.
We're happy to share
on YouTube. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Christina, thank you so much for having us.
Hopefully I get to meet you in person. I don't know if I met you in China because I was there, but I will be in Hungary. So maybe.
I hope I can be in Hungary. I'm not sure, but definitely looking forward to the next event and to bump into each other. Or next time I'm in the US, I'm happy to reach out.
Yes, come visit. Come surf that big 14-foot race board, or I'll borrow one for you to race here. Yeah. And Anya, hopefully see you this year too, later this year.
Brilliant.
Great.
I'll see you in Hungary.
Thank you both.
Thank you so much for your time. It was amazing talk.
Take care.